Okay, so I assume you are seeing and hearing me at this point. This is a hands-on webinar. You're gonna love it. It's a totally different way to learn online, and I've been getting so much great feedback from it. But I'm just gonna, one quick message, because we're gonna get started in a few minutes, so you'll have a few minutes to do what I'm about to show you here. Because it's hands-on, it all revolves around you downloading a file or the images that I'm using in this tutorial. Okay, so you're gonna see a link pop up here. You're gonna go to that link and you're gonna download. There's only one file to download. It's a zip file. It'll go to your downloads folder on your computer. You usually double click a zip file to open it. These are two basic computer things that I have to assume you have done before today. I can't help you with these things because it's all on your computer. It has nothing to do with Adobe or anything like that, or me. But once you get those files and you unzip it, just put that folder onto your desktop. It doesn't really matter where it is, and we don't worry about what icons or what the file names are. None of that stuff. We will take care of all of that once we start in the webinar. I just want to get you downloading that file and unzipping it and having it just know where it is. That's the only thing you need to do at this point. Know where it is so that when we dive into the webinar, you'll be ready to go. I think you're absolutely going to love this format, so I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Well, hello everybody, Matt here, and I want to welcome you to our hands-on webinar. I put together something I think is pretty different out there for you, where you're actually going to follow along, okay? I'm going to do something and then you're going to follow along and do it. And I think the power of this is that in the next 30 minutes, you're going to actually do something, okay? This isn't a video that you passively watch. Maybe you take notes, and we all hope that when it's done that you take something and you put it into practice, okay? I'm not saying that that's bad. I think there's a place for it. But in this case, I want you doing it, okay? I want you to do this full Lightroom Classic to Photoshop workflow. I want you doing it because at the end of this 30, 40 minutes, you will have done it, okay? And you may discover you need more help in some area. You may discover you're further ahead than you thought. I promise, regardless, you'll learn a tip or two from it. But at least you know when you're done with this, you have accomplished something for today, okay? And it'll give you a springboard, I think, into going into something else, okay? So here's what we're gonna do. In the next 2 minutes, we're gonna be working. I'm not gonna take 20 minutes to do an introduction here. We're gonna be working. So get a glass of water, get your coffee, turn your phone off, get ready, because we will be working. You will be following along. I'll do a very quick introduction. For those of you that if we've met in person or virtually before, good to see you again. If we haven't, I'll put up one slide. And that is, my name is Matt Klaskowski. You can find me over at MattK.com, so you don't have to worry about spelling the last name. Over on that website, you can find my free tutorials. You can find my blog. I've got courses, presets. I'm a Sony Artisan of Imagery, which is Sony's ambassador program. So you can find my portfolio over there, anything about any events that I do, as well as gear and links to anything that I use. So really the website's the place to go if you want to do anything from here. You can always find it over on my website. I've been doing this stuff for about 20 years now, okay? And years ago, I decided to very intentfully own the role of photo educator, coach, mentor, okay? And what that means is that I'm not a photographer, all right? I don't go out and I don't have paid clients, I don't have paid assignments, I don't sell my photos. I am 100% dedicated to photo education. That is my only job. And what that means for you guys is that I have no ego attached to any of this stuff, all right? I have one goal, which is to get you better. Okay? Because if I get you better at photography or photo editing, if I can get you better, I did my job right. And that way it's a win-win for both of us. So I love to hear, I fully enjoy when somebody says, hey Matt, that's a beautiful photo. Thank you. When somebody says, hey Matt, you transformed my learning. I get it now. That's the best thing that I can hear. Okay? So we're going to jump right in here. I've got Lightroom Classic open. The last thing that I will say to you as we jump in, as far as this hands-on process is going to go, here's what I would do, and here's how I will do this. This will be a slower pace. It's meant for a beginner, okay? So it'll be a slower pace. If you're advanced, it might go too slow for you, but what we'll do is I'm going to go through and very slowly demonstrate a step of something, okay? And then what I would suggest is, number one, if you've got two screens, great. Maybe drag this over to the other screen if you can. But what I would suggest is watch as I do it the first time, okay? Then as I do it the second time, flip over to Lightroom or Photoshop, wherever we happen to be, and I will go slow enough and then go ahead and do it. Okay, so I'll go through everything basically twice. All right, the first time will be very slowly demonstrating it to you. I would try to absorb it at that point, and then the second time you'll hear me narrate it, and hopefully once you get over to your program, you'll be able to follow along because you will have already seen it. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll switch over to my screen here. All right, and we'll go ahead and get started. So I've got Lightroom Classic open, and that should be the very first thing you do. Make sure you open up Lightroom Classic and just go click on Library up at the top here. Don't worry about where you are, what folder you're in, anything like that. Just click on Library up at the top there, okay? And again, you can be looking at anything. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna go open up on Windows, you're gonna open up a Windows Explorer window. On Mac, you're gonna open up a Finder window. I can't help you too much with this stuff because this is basic computer stuff. This has nothing to do with Adobe, but you want to find the two images that I gave you to download, okay? You should have downloaded them by this point. They came in a zip file. You should have unzipped them by this point. You need to find those two images. One of them says MattK Coast Photo. One of them says MattK Sky Photo. They're in a folder called MattK Demo Photos. So wherever you put them on your computer, you've got to get to this point where you can see both images. Don't worry about the icons. Depending on your operating system, you may see different icons. If you've installed other software editing programs, they may take over and put a different icon on there. Yours might not have a PS Photoshop icon on it. That just has to do with the software you installed. It took over the file association. It doesn't change anything about the way it works, okay? So you can do some Google research on how to change that back to Photoshop or Lightroom or something like that, but it won't change the outcome of this tutorial, okay? So you just need to get to the point where you can see both images. And you want to get to the point where you have a Finder or Windows Explorer window in one place and you can see Lightroom behind it, okay? So you might have to move one to the side and move the other one over or something like that. You want to get to the point where you have both of those windows that you can see them. And we're going to make this process easy. You're going to select both photos, okay? You might see a list view like this, whatever it happens to be. Maybe you click on one and you can hold down the Shift key and click on the other one so they're both selected. And then all you're going to do is drag and drop over into Lightroom. And when you drop, it's going to open up the import dialog box, just like I have here. Okay, it's going to open up that big import window, and you'll see 2 photos inside of there. So we just cut out the process of having, to go up to the file menu, go into import, and navigate to where that. We cut out that process just by drag drop. It's just a lot simpler. Another alternative you can do is you can drag and drop, and you could see down at the bottom, I've got my Lightroom icon in the little dock at the bottom. So you can drag and drop them down onto that icon as well. And that will get you into the right place. So there are a couple different ways to do things, depending on your operating systems, may work a little bit different, but we want to import these 2 photos. So I've got 2 of them here. They're both checked. So that's telling Lightroom where they're coming from. That's the left-hand side. The top middle is what you want to do with them. I just want to add them into Lightroom without moving them. Okay, just make Lightroom aware of these photos. That's it. So I'm going to go add. On the right-hand side, under file handling, we're not going to choose anything. Embedded in Sidecar, if that's what you normally choose, it's what I normally choose. We're just going to leave it. But again, we're not going to go through this whole import process because that'll take us at least an hour in and of itself. I just want to get you to the point where you can get the photos in. We don't need to change any settings on them. Okay, so we've got this window. We've got our 2 photos selected. The biggest thing, click on Add at the top, and Embedded in Sidecar over on the right-hand side. You don't have to click or choose or change anything else. So once you're here, and the only thing that might change a little bit is you might see a compact view. There's a little icon in the lower left-hand corner. So you might see something like this. If you see this window, it just means maybe you click this button down here. So we can click it again to expand it to see everything. And once we're at that point, we just click Import. Okay, and that will bring those photos into Lightroom for us. So now they are inside of Lightroom. Now we can work on them. In fact, you can go click on that first image here because that's the one we're going to be working with first. So to very quickly recap again, I know I'm going to say it and you follow, and then you're going to go and do it. I'm going to guess because I talked for a long time in that, you probably went over to your computer and did that as well. But just remember, you're going to want to get a window where you have Lightroom. You want to get a window where you can see the 2 files that I had for you to download, and just drag them over into your Lightroom window, and that will enact the import process for you. You don't have to change any settings in there other than click Add at the top. Okay, so we've got our photo ready. Let's go ahead and we'll click on the landscape photo here, and we can get to the develop module. To start editing, we're going to press D for develop, or you can just press the word develop over here. Now, most cases, you're going to have settings that are zeroed out. I'm in the basic panel in the develop module here. In most cases, you'll have settings that are zeroed out. In my case, I already had some settings on this photo, so Lightroom is showing them. So all I'm going to do is come down here to the bottom and press reset. And that zeroes out all of my settings. Okay, so again, you might not have to do that because yours really, you won't have edited this photo before, so yours should be zeroed out. But if you ever want to reset everything, remember, Lightroom is never permanent. Any changes you make in Lightroom are always undoable. So we just press reset. To start editing, let's crop this because the crooked horizon line is bugging me. So let's first crop this photo. We can get to the crop tool by clicking on the little icon up in the top here, okay? Or we can press the letter R for the crop tool, and that'll take us into crop mode. Now this is a good time to really settle into the watch me do it and then you do it phase. So watch me do it means we chose our crop tool, go down to where it says angle, and just to the left of that is a little icon, a little straight, and it's actually a level tool. And we're going to click on that to open up the level option here. And then we just click and drag along a horizon line. Okay. When we let go, Lightroom straightens the photo for us. I don't really have any other cropping to do to this, but if we did, we could always go in there and crop it. You've got aspect ratios over on the right-hand side if you needed to crop to a specific aspect ratio. I'm not, because right now I don't have a specific output size to send this to. So it just doesn't matter what I crop it to. If I knew I wanted to print an 8x10, if I knew I was going to save it to Photoshop or save it for Facebook or Instagram, then that might change. You might have to change your aspect ratio. But right now, in the absence of a need for it, I just creatively crop the photo any way I want. So when you're done, you just hit close, okay? Again, now if you want to check it out, we go over here to the crop tool. You can press the letter R as the keyboard shortcut for it. You're going to go down to the word angle, and just to the left of it, you're going to see a straighten tool icon. All you have to do is click on it to enable it, and then go over to your photo and click and drag along the horizon line. And that will give Lightroom the information it needs to know to straighten your photo. As I said before, you can click close in the crop tool area, or you can click done. So if you went to the bottom right-hand corner next to the previous button, you could see the done button. You can click done, and that will get you out of there too. Close and done do the same exact thing. It doesn't matter. Same thing, just to get to a different place. All right, so we've cropped the photo here. Only other thing I would do before we get into editing, or real editing, would be go to lens corrections, the lens corrections panel. All right, and click the little checkbox that says enable profile corrections. It'll fix a little bit of distortion from wide angle lenses. It can also help with a little bit of the edge vignetting. So again, if you're following along, you can switch over to Lightroom Classic. You're going to go to your lens corrections panel. So it's 5 or 6 panels down right below the detail panel. And then you're going to click the checkbox that says enable profile corrections. And that's it. You don't need to make any other changes to it. From there, we're going to go to our basic panel. So we're going to edit this in 2 different ways. Okay, we're going to edit maybe even 3 really, but the first 2, I just want a demo. So you don't have to follow along with the first 2 at all. The third one is the good one, and that's the one that you'll follow along with. But I want to just show you what's available here. So we're in the basic panel. I could always click auto. Don't follow along with this. Try it on your own sometime. I can always click auto and see what Lightroom does. So it's in the basic panel. It's right above near your exposure area. And Lightroom will have its try at automatically fixing the photo. Okay. I'm going to go to edit, undo, because I want to undo the auto setting that I just did. All right, so I don't want to reset because I did some lens corrections and cropping already, so I don't want to reset, just undo. The other thing that we can do is, because this is a landscape photo, common problem. I'm shooting into the sun, it's going down in front of me, sky is super bright, foreground's really dark. So I overexposed it a bit. I know the sky's not blown out, but I wanted to get some detail in the foreground, so I overexposed deliberately a little bit, okay? And that comes with a little bit of practice. The more you do it, the more you'll start to feel familiar with it. But common landscape photo, we can just pull back on highlights and push open shadows, all right? Nothing too crazy here. 2 sliders gets us a good part of the way. The problem with that is it's global. So when I pull back on the highlights, it's pulling back on the highlights in the water, rocks, everything in the photo, it's pulling back the highlights on. It's not something I really want to do, and I don't really want to open up the shadows everywhere. You know, I want to selectively bring out detail where I need it. So let's do this. Well, actually, you shouldn't have followed along with that part, but if you did, double click the word highlights, double click the word shadows, resets to 0. So double clicking the name of any adjustment resets it to 0. So from here, we're going to use what I consider the most powerful tools in Lightroom, and that is these tools up in the top right corner here. We've got the brush, we've got a radial filter, and we've got a linear graduated filter, which simulates a neutral density grad filter that we would use over our lens in the field. So brush, circle, line. We're going to go to the third one here, or the first one, depending on how you're looking at it. And if you hover over anything, it will generally give you a keyboard shortcut if there's one available. So the graduated filter, M. We're going to go to the graduated filter, and we're going to darken the sky. Okay, so again, watch this part, and then you can follow along. So what I want to do here is I want to bring my exposure negative, and I'm going to bring my highlights negative. Doesn't matter how much right now. I'll probably over exaggerate it a little bit just for sake of demo purposes, but we will finesse this after we see it. So we're going to bring those two sliders to the left, okay? And then we're going to move our cursor over the photo, and we're going to be about, maybe an inch or two above the water horizon line, maybe right in the middle, doesn't matter. And what we're going to do is click and drag down. The further I drag, the more feathered the adjustment is. The less I drag, the harder that line becomes. So I want to go about half, half of it above, half of it below. That's good there. And then you can always move your cursor over it and drag it up and down. Okay? So right about there. As you move over to doing this yourself, a couple of things you might want to know. Number one, if any of your slider adjustments are already set, you can double click the word effect to reset them all to 0. That will reset all of these to 0. Number two, if you don't see all the stuff that I see here, okay, that means there's a little arrow up here that maybe you accidentally closed, and maybe you see this view. So if you follow the word effect over to the right, you'll see a little arrow. Make sure it's pointing down, and you see all the adjustments, that it's not pointing over to the left. All right, so once you choose your graduated filter, you can go ahead and press it, and press the keyboard shortcut M to get there. Once you choose that, what you're going to do is drag the exposure to the left and the highlights to the left. Then you're going to move your cursor over the photo and just drag down. If you want to keep it to a straight line, hold the Shift key. If you don't, you'll see we can rotate it. You might want to do that at times. In this case, this is a straight horizon, so we just hold the Shift key down and it keeps it perfectly straight. Okay, so from there, what we're going to do is now we can adjust those settings a little bit. So we can adjust the exposure to be maybe a little bit darker. I think rather than making the whole sky darker, I wouldn't move the exposure past maybe -1. I'd pull back on the highlights, because it's really just the bright parts of the photo of the sky that I want to pull back on. So to me, it's not the whole sky that needs to get darker. It's just those super bright areas that were inside of there. So that's one option, is to just pull back a little bit more on the highlights there. And then sometimes we can come down here and we can boost the saturation a little bit too. So I'm not only darkening the sky, but you can see here, and now I'm going to boost that saturation color a little bit. So again, for those of you following along, you could switch over to your photo. I only did -1 on the exposure, and then I brought down the highlights to -0.75%. Brought those highlights down quite a bit. And then I went and I boosted the saturation to 25% or so. So again, and there's no rule for this stuff. It's just you look at it on your screen and it's like, what looks good to you? Sometimes it's, you have to think when you're out shooting and take a mental image of what does this look like, knowing that your camera can't capture it, and you might have to do some editing later and you try to remember how dark your sky was, Sometimes I take a photo with my phone, which actually sees the world pretty much as it is. And sometimes I can refer to that when I'm editing the bigger picture too. So, all right, so that's the sky. Let's go down again. We can hit at the bottom right-hand corner of the panel, or down toward the bottom above the film strip, we can hit done, or we can hit close. Remember, they both do the same thing, okay? Now from here, we're gonna use the adjustment brush, which I think is the most powerful tool inside of Lightroom altogether, okay? We're gonna do a little dodging and burning, which is a fancy way of saying painting with light. We're gonna draw people's eye by brightening things, darkening things you could do as well. So we're gonna go click on the little brush icon up at the top here, and it behaves a lot of what you know from the graduated filter will translate over to this. So again, go ahead and watch me do this part, and then I will turn it over to you guys to actually do it. But things like double clicking effect will reset all of your sliders to 0. Just like we have settings that can get hidden up at the top with that little arrow, we can also have brush settings A little different from the graduated filter, that if you don't click that little arrow down here, you might not see that there's other settings in addition to just having a size setting down there. So we've got feather, flow, density. Set all those at 100 for now. Okay, remember this is an in-depth tutorial, so right now all we're going to do is really worry about size, and you can put it at around 10. Okay, now we're going to set a couple of settings up here, and I'll explain why. One of those things we want to do is add some exposure. So I'll increase the exposure setting. I'll increase the shadows setting. Okay, that's going to make things brighter. I'm also going to increase texture. Texture does exactly what it says it does. It adds texture. So things like rocks and trees and concrete that have a textured appearance, texture will enhance that and almost makes it look sharper in some cases. So we'll add some texture to this. I'm even going to go up here. Whenever I brighten something, it tends to get colder in nature, cooler, bluer whenever you're brightening something. So I'll add some temperature toward the warm side here so that it gets warmer, okay? So that we don't get a very cold look, because we have a warm sunset happening here. We want that light to be reflected, all right? So once you increase those settings, and remember, we're not tied to them. Once you increase those settings, what you're going to do is use your brush, and you can always use the right and left bracket key to make it larger or smaller. You're going to use the brush and you're going to start painting, okay? And I'm not going to go near the edges yet, and I'm going to tell you why, because I have a little trick for that. I can already tell it's too bright. So you could keep painting if you want and keep it this way. I already know it's too bright, so I'm going to pull back on my exposure here so that it just makes it a little bit easier for me to see a little bit more realistically. And I'd go down here and paint. We can paint down toward the bottom there, maybe a little bit over here as well. Okay, I'm not going to paint in the middle because I don't need it. Remember, we're using the brush so we don't have to do a global adjustment, because the brush lets us do local adjustments into the areas where we actually need it. All right. Now, there's one little setting that can mean all the difference in the world, and that is auto mask. The auto mask checkbox, which is down in your brush settings. When you turn it on and you keep the middle of your brush over whatever the subject that you're painting is, Lightroom will help keep it from spilling over and making a glow around your object. So I can use it over here as well. You need a pretty good definition between the two, but it comes in super handy. It is a little slower. It can be a little splotchy in places. So when I'm not using it, I go back over here and I turn it off, okay? Because I don't need it right now, so I want to make sure I turn it off when I don't need it. Only turn it on when you actually need to use it there. So we can go through here. Maybe I'll add a little bit of brushing down there at the bottom too, okay? And then the last thing is there's a little toggle switch down in the bottom left corner of the brush panel, and you can toggle the changes off and then toggle them back on. So you get to see a before and after of what just the brushing is. And it makes a huge difference in this case. We really draw attention to these cliffs and these rocks, and we make them, by making them brighter, we're helping people look at them more. We're making them a bigger part of the photo, okay? So assuming you haven't followed along yet, you can jump over to Lightroom and again, head up to your brush tool in the top right corner. Keyboard shortcut is K, in case you're curious. And then I'll list off the settings. So you could be looking at them right now, and I'll list off the settings that I changed. Double click the word effect, set everything to 0. I added a little bit of temperature toward the right, up to about 15. I added exposure just barely, like 0.01, not a lot. I added about 35% shadows. I added about 50% texture, okay? And then down at the brush settings, size is around 10 or 12, feather, flow, density, everything else is set up to 100. And then you can start brushing. So as you're brushing, feel free to experiment with the right and left bracket keys to make your brush bigger or smaller to get into some of those little areas there. All right. The other thing that you can do is experiment with auto mask. When you get around a harder contrasty edge, you can turn the auto mask checkbox on, and that's in your brush panel toward the bottom, right under flow. You can turn that checkbox on, and that will allow Lightroom to start detecting the edges for you. All right. And then you can always go in there and turn it off. Also, a keyboard shortcut for that when you have the brush tool enabled is the letter A. A for auto mask, so you don't even have to go over there and turn it on and off. You can just press the letter A as a keyboard shortcut to turn that off and then back on. Okay, so this is something I'm not going to spend too much more time on it because I want to keep you moving through here, but this is something to come back to when you watch the replay. Come back to this and spend some time on this area because this is an important part of Lightroom. So we can click close or done. They both do the same thing. Don't follow me on this one. If I were to finish this inside of Lightroom, I would add a little vignette to darken the edges a little bit and tie it in toward the middle, direct people's attention from the darker areas toward the bright. I'm not going to do that here because we're going to jump to Photoshop. I'll do it as a finishing touch and you can walk along with me when I do that. Just wanted to show you that if I did, this would be the part if you were done in Lightroom, you could do it here. I'll show you one last thing before Photoshop, and that is the backslash key. Press the backslash key, you can see the before photo. Press the backslash key again, and that'll bring you back to the after photo. So backslash before, backslash, that's the one, the top of the slash is toward the left, the bottom's toward the right if you're not quite sure about that. And then from here, let's move over to Photoshop, okay? So to get over there, all we have to do is go up here to the photo menu, come down to edit in, and then choose Adobe Photoshop, okay? So again, go into Lightroom. If you're in the develop module, go to the photo menu, go down to edit in, and then edit in Adobe Photoshop. Whatever version you happen to have installed, it works great. You'll need the 2021 version to follow along with me because I'm going to do a sky replacement with this using Photoshop sky replacement feature. So that might take a minute to package the file up because it's going to make a copy of it. That's the way Lightroom works. You can't ever edit just a raw photo in Photoshop. So it's going to make a copy of my file, and then it's going to jump me over into the Photoshop interface like we have here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go head up to the edit menu. Again, just follow along or watch this at first, and then you can follow along a little bit later. So we're going to head up to the edit menu, and then we're going to go down here to sky replacement. This is only in the subscription version of Photoshop, and it came out in October of 2020. So it's called Photoshop 2021, but they added a sky replacement feature, okay? You can Google search, you can even Google search my name and sky replacement tutorials because I've done some before, before this came out, but this is the automatic way we're gonna use here. So we go over here to edit sky replacement. Opens up the sky dialog box here. A couple things about this. Number one, there's a lot of features in here. I can't cover them all. I'm going to give you a link that will take you to a tutorial that I've done, so you can just maybe take a picture of the screen with your phone if you wanted to. Take a picture of it with the link on it. To a tutorial I've done where I've gone through every setting inside of here. Okay, I'm gonna basically just run through a very quick sky replacement. Now, what we're going to do inside of this window is we need to choose a sky. You may have remembered you downloaded one of the demo images was a sky. So you've got a couple of options. You could go through the Adobe ones. Anything that says Matt in front of it is one I created. I made a folder and I imported my own skies. Okay, but you could run through here and you could see the spectacular folder comes from Adobe and sunsets comes from Adobe. You can try some of those if you want, all right? You don't have to use the same image I'm using. If you want to use the image I'm using, then you could come down to the bottom and click that little plus icon, and then you would just go to the folder that had the demo images, in this case, the MattK demo folder, and you would select that sky photo. All right, you'd select that sky photo and then hit open at the bottom. And that will bring the sky that I'm using in here. You'll have the option to name it if you wanted to here. All right, click OK. And that will append that toward the bottom of the list. So again, I'll cancel out of this. You can follow along. You go into Photoshop, go to the top edit menu. Then you're going to go down to sky replacement. Inside of the sky replacement window, you can either click on the photo of the sky at the top where it says the word sky, and you can select a sky from inside of there, or you can click on there, click on the little sky thumbnail at the top, and then you can click the little plus icon at the bottom to create a new sky. And then you would just go navigate yourself to the folder that contains the sky demo photo that I had here. Okay, you select that, you give it a name, click OK, and that will show up in your list. You'll see it all the way down there at the bottom, and you should see it already replaced your sky inside of here. All right, now I'm going to move this window to the side for a second here, because one of the reasons this works so well is if you look, if I hit the preview checkbox, I can turn it off. Look at the color blue to orangish. Look at my sky, blue to orangish. That's why it works, because it takes on the same tones as the original photo. So you have to keep that in mind. It'll be very difficult to take a cloudy, gloomy day and replace it with this sky. They just wouldn't work. Inside of here, we're not going to do too many settings. Inside of here, we're going to pretty much leave it mostly at the defaults here. You've got a couple of ways to adjust the edge of the sky. You've got sky adjustments here. So if you look, there's two sections. There's the sky adjustments section, and there's the foreground adjustments. So in the sky adjustments, I can make my sky warmer. I can make it more blue. Okay. I can make the sky brighter. I can make the sky darker. So I can go through those adjustments and work on the sky. And then I can collapse that and I can go into the foreground adjustments, and I can add a little bit more of a lighting adjustment, which is going to help it blend. And I can add a color adjustment. Color adjustment is going to take the color of the sky and it's going to infuse that color into the foreground more. So you can see my foreground just got more yellow and orange. I'll bring it down to the left here. You can see my foreground looks very cool. Bring it to the right. You see now my foreground takes on the colors and tones of the sky image. And that's some of the Photoshop trickery that's going on behind the scenes there. So you can boost that up quite a bit and you'll get a better toned photo. At the very bottom of this, you're going to choose Output 2, and I'm going to choose New Layers. Okay, so Output 2, New Layers. All right. Again, as you're following along, if you were just watching me for a second there, you choose your sky. You've got two sections inside of that window. You've got the sky adjustments section, and then you've got the foreground adjustments section. All right. So inside of there, you can make adjustments. The only thing I really did was in the foreground adjustments section, I dragged the color adjustment up here to about 80 or so. Okay, because that's going to adjust the foreground and it's going to add color, and it's going to add the color of the sky. So Photoshop knows the sky has a certain color to it, and it's going to add that color overlay to the foreground so they match a little bit better. And then at the bottom under Output 2, choose New Layers, and then you can simply click OK. Now what that's going to do is it will create, and I'm going to double click some panels here to hide them. What that'll do is that will create a folder, and it's called Sky Replacement Group. Inside of that folder, you'll see all of the images and layers that Photoshop is using to do this sky replacement. So there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on. Only thing I might do here, click on the actual sky layer and drag the opacity down to about 80%. And what that'll do is that'll make it so the sky becomes a little bit more see-through, and what you're seeing is the original sky underneath it. You're dragging the opacity of the replaced sky so you see more of the original sky underneath it. Okay, so from here we have our sky going. The only other thing that I would do that's a very Photoshop-like thing is some distraction removal. And we don't have a lot of distractions in this photo, but a couple of little spots are sticking out to me on these rocks, and I know they're reflections of water because there's some water that must have washed up on here. So I know that they're reflections of water, but because we're not so close to them, sometimes I'll go in and remove those things because sometimes they can just look at, you know, like bright spots. And I'll also look in the water. There's a couple of little spots over here that just look like sensor dust or spots. So what we have to do here is let's go ahead and I'm going to collapse this sky replacement folder. Okay, there's a little arrow next to it. I'm just going to collapse it. And what we'll do here is let's go and we'll click on that sky replacement group at the top there. And we're going to use a little keyboard shortcut in Photoshop. It's not documented anywhere, but you click on that folder at the top to set that as like the topmost layer. And then what we're going to do is press Command Option Shift E on the Mac or Control Alt Shift E on the PC, and you watch for a second before you do it. It creates a composite layer of everything merged together at the top there. And that lets me work on a new layer, a new everything, and it still lets me keep all my original stuff below. So if you want to switch over to your computer, you're going to click on the topmost folder that says Sky Replacement Group. You're going to click on it to target it, okay? And then once you target it, you're going to press Command Option Shift E on the Mac or Control Alt Shift E on the PC. Command Option Shift E, Control Alt Shift. So press Command Option Shift or Control Alt Shift and then press E. And it'll make that new layer up at the top there. And once you have that layer, what we're going to do is press the letter J. And that's going to take us to the grouping of tools. And if you look at my screen here, you will see it's 6 or 7 tools down. It's the spot healing brush. Okay. If you press and hold on that grouping, J will get you there, but if you press and hold on that grouping, you can see all the tools included inside of it. We want the spot healing brush. The nice part about the spot healing brush, and I'm going to press Control or Command plus to zoom in on the photo. The nice part about the spot healing brush is all we do is paint. I don't have to sample. Okay, I don't have to sample anything. I just go in here and I paint, and all that stuff goes away. I can hold the spacebar key down to pan around the photo. That area stuck out to me. That stuck out. That stuck out to me. If I just see a dark area that doesn't look like much, like looks more like a spot, I'll get rid of it. Here's another good one over here. Okay. Again, the spot healing brush is nice because it removes things, but we don't have to sample anything. We don't have to do any sampling or anything like that. So again, if you're following along, you can press the letter J. That will take you over to the spot healing brush group. If you haven't chosen the spot healing brush, you can press and hold on the icon in the toolbox and choose the spot healing brush at the top, and then simply no sampling needed, no nothing, just simply go around and paint over things. If they're small enough, it'll usually do a really good job of getting rid of it. We have other distraction removal tools. We're not going to get into them here, but the spot healing brush is a good, quick, easy win to get rid of some of those small things in the photo there. Okay, so we're about ready to wrap this up. From here, what we do is we got to go back to Lightroom, so we just go to File, Save. All right, that's it. I don't have to save as, I don't have to change the name, I don't do anything, just hit File, Save inside of Photoshop. All right, Command or Control S is the keyboard shortcut. So you go to File, Save. If you flip back over to Lightroom, and by the way, I'm flipping back and forth with Command Tab on the Mac, and I believe it's Alt Tab on the PC. If you ever see me bringing up this little thing here, Command Tab on the Mac, Alt Tab on the PC. It's an operating system shortcut, has nothing to do with Adobe. So, but it's a good quick way. You can look down here in the film strip. Now you see that it added our photo back in here, brought it right back over into Lightroom. So we can see our original photo, and then we can see our Photoshop edited photo. And at this point, the only thing I would do to finish it up, 2 small things. I would maybe add a little bit of a vignette to it. So we can go over here to our effects panel and add a vignette, drag the amount slider to the left a little bit, midpoint to the left, feather to the right. So I can add a vignette to this to finish it off. I think it does a nice job of focusing our attention in toward the middle, takes us away from the edges. Another thing you could do is go to your basic panel. All right, go under Profile. If you look at the very top, it says Profile. Follow that over, and you're going to see a little grid icon, 4 little squares. All right. So these profiles can be used for many things. We're going to click on that icon. Again, just follow the word profile over. Click anywhere over on that icon. These can be used for a number of things. I could go into an hour-long tutorial on them, but what I would say is the ones at the top, artistic, black and white, modern, and vintage, all come with Adobe. I've got some other ones down here that are my own, but these all come with Adobe. Click on artistic and you can hover over and you can get all these really nice little color treatments to finish off your photo. It's almost like a little preset of sorts. So you could always click on one. Some make it a little more contrasty. Some give it a little bit more of a twilight look or a matte look or a faded look. So these are fun little ways that you can always add something a little bit different as you finish off your photo with a little bit more color stylization. Okay. And if you ever wanted to share this photo, so all you would have to do is come up here to the file menu and go down to export. And inside that export window, you can save it out as a JPEG, you can resize it. I'd ask you not to because this is my photo, but for your own photos, if you ever, you want to get it out of Lightroom and do something with it, file export, and you can export it as a JPEG, you can resize it, and that will give you a file that you can then share with other people. Okay, a couple of things as we take a quick intermission here and we start to bring this in for a landing. 2 things. I'm going to answer some of your questions. Okay, questions about sharpening and noise reduction. I know I didn't do any here. Reflections. A lot of people ask the sky replacement. How do you work with reflections or a more complex background? I'll also talk about what about if you're not using Lightroom and you want to do this all in Photoshop. I'll show you there. So I think you'll learn a couple of tips along the way in answering some of those questions. But first, I said there was 2 things. First, I'm going to ask for a few minutes of your time to help pay the bills. All right, I'm just going to be honest with it. I got a kid in college. I got one going to college next year. Got to help pay the bills. So I appreciate if you give me a few minutes. I put together a bundle for you that I honestly think if you liked what you saw here, you will really like this bundle. And the great part about it is I created everything in it in a systematic way to tie together so that it keeps your learning very, very consistent. So the first thing is the foundation. This is my Lightroom system and my Photoshop system. I call them systems because they're not just courses, okay? These are 10, 12 courses in one. So if you were to look at my Lightroom system, it is broken out into 10 sections. Each one of these sections is anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes long, and they all contain short videos, short bite-sized videos. I want you to finish a topic. I don't want you to get stuck watching a 20-minute video that you can't finish and have to figure out how to get back to it and all that. I want you to finish a topic. So short, bite-sized mini courses. So the Lightroom system, it's got 10 sections in it: importing, organizing, rating and filtering, which Lightroom to use because there's so many of them, getting around in the preferences, collections, keywords, develop basics, advanced develop, exporting and sharing, and backing up. And if you saw the original slide, I'm even including my mastering catalogs course as part of that because that's a questions I get all the time about catalogs. So you get all of those mini courses in one in the Lightroom system. Okay, and you can bounce in and out of whatever you want. Okay, you're not stuck, trying to find your way around. It's very easy to get around and learn what you want from it. And then we go to my Photoshop system. So my Photoshop system is the same idea. So if you look at what's included, there's absolute basics, opening and saving an image, layers. There's a 2-hour section on layers alone because they're so important. Adjustment layers, blend modes, how to create selections, complex selections, layer masks, removing distractions, retouching portraits, smart objects, camera raw, actions and automation, and then there's projects that tie all of those things together into some final projects, okay? So same idea as a Lightroom system, broken up into these mini courses that let you learn what you want to learn. But here, if you don't buy anything, please take this advice. Photoshop could be this big. And if you take all the other features that aren't for photographers away, what you have is a program that's like this. And it's so much easier to learn. So regardless of who you learn from, target yourself from just learning the photography features. My Photoshop system is made for photographers when Lightroom or Camera Raw isn't enough. What do you do after your raw editing? If it's not enough, that's where Photoshop comes in. Okay, and that's how it was created for just photographers. So you won't learn about all the other stuff. It makes it learning so much easier. Okay, From there, that's the foundation. Now we go to the creative, which is my preset system. Inside of my preset system are 7 packages: landscape, light and clean, astro, ocean, water, portrait presets, sports presets, and city, street, urban style presets. Each pack contains 15 for a total of 90. I believe less is more. I don't think you want 400 presets. I think it's too confusing. So here's what I did. I made 15 great presets in each one of those packs, and I included 90 minutes of video that shows you how to install them, how to use them, how to apply them. But here's what's important. What happens when they don't look the same on your photo as they look on my photo? Because it's going to happen. So how do you adjust them? What should you adjust? What should you look to adjust? And just as important, how do you make your own presets? So now you build up your own library. You're not just reliant on my presets for this. I think they can make you more creative. I think they can make it faster. And I think they can help you learn Lightroom and Photoshop easier because you can dissect each one and look at the settings inside of it. So that's the preset system. That'll dovetail us into the brush and gradient system. So if you remember before, we were adjusting the sky, we were adjusting the foreground, everything inside of there. So the brush and gradient system includes presets for those graduated radial filters and the brush tool that we saw inside of there. All of these presets that help you get effects fast, all right? And the best part about it is, number one, there's 3 packs. There's the landscape pack, there's the portrait pack, and then there's the dodge burn adding light pack to it. So you get all 3 packs, but you also get videos. So just like the preset system is how to use them, how to install them, but what happens when you need to make adjustments to them because they don't look right on your photos. And I think that's the most important part. And then again, how do you make your own presets? So you're not tied to just my presets. You can start to build your own library that works for you and your photography, okay? From there, if you purchase before the webinar is over, I'm gonna throw in a bonus and you're gonna recognize the photo that's on the cover of this. So this is my No Light, No Problem course. This is my crowd favorite bestseller ever. People love this course. They lose their mind over it. So essentially, no light, when the light's not great, what do? We can't all go back and reshoot. We don't have the limited time and money to go do that. So we have to make the best out of it. And I show you all of these techniques that tie in all the things you learn inside of Lightroom and all the things you learn inside of Photoshop and all that stuff. They tie it in to help add light and depth and dimension to a very flat photo. So there's 7 projects. You got a glimpse of one of them inside of here, but there's 7 projects in total, and I'm telling you, people absolutely love this course. It's start to finish, and it is a great tie-in to the foundational and creative stuff that you have as the other part of the bundle, okay? Now, if you were to list all those things out, what you get is you get the foundation, the Lightroom and Photoshop system. Those are $199 each. You're not going to pay that, but that's what they cost. The preset system, the brush and gradient system, and the No Light, No Problem course if you grab this before the end of the webinar. And when you add all that up, guys, you're going to get a big number. I get it. We probably just met. If you haven't seen my training before, I don't expect you to invest that much right now. So what there is I put together a bundle price of all of those products. Okay. So when you add everything up in the bundle, what you come down to is it's a roughly 60-ish% off. This is a bundle. You're not going to find it in my store. You're not going to find it anywhere else on the website. So it's just for this webinar only. But you get over 60% off on all that stuff. So that's the bundle price for you. So if you're interested in that, I hope you take advantage of it. To help remove the risk from you, there is a 30-day money-back guarantee, which is fairly standard across the industry. But I honor it. I've never not honored it from anybody. No questions asked. You send me an email, this isn't working for me, I don't like it. Within 30 days, you get your money back, no questions asked. And I can't put this onto a slide, but guys, I stand behind my company. I mean, this is my business. It's me and my wife. My wife does the business and the accounting. She gets all the emails in. And if they have anything to do with Photoshop and Lightroom, guess who they go to? They go to me, and I've never not answered an email. So I take this very seriously. I take treating my customers very well, very seriously. So I hope you hop on board with that. One last thing. So the bundle is not available in the store. This next thing is also not available in the store, but it's not part of the bundle. If you want to add it on at checkout, I at least want to show you what it is, which is I included a couple of extra things, some more popular things. Number one, my Facebook group. I can't put a price on it because you can't join it. Okay, it's a private group. I only open up enrollment for certain periods and occasions, which is why there's not 100,000 people in it. You know, there's a very small group of people that are all very good. They abide by the rules and they're very, very helpful. But it's Ask Matt. You put in a question, you ask for a critique, you post a photo, whatever it is, I jump into every single topic and I answer. Other people jump in as well, but you know, you can take or leave whatever you want, but I do jump in and communicate with you inside of there. And then I'm also including my sharing and print bundle. So perfect print course, if you are into printing, this course will get you there, help you get those perfect prints. And then my logo and watermark toolkit. If you ever want to create those cool little signatures or marks that are very unobtrusive that you can put onto your photos that you share online, or even if you print, it includes that course as well. So you don't have to go buy a logo. And if in 6 months you get bored of the one that you designed, and you'll learn how to design some really good ones. It comes with fonts. I show you everything along the way so yours looks professional. But if you're bored of it in 6 months, you just go make yourself another one. You don't have to go pay for it again. And you'll learn a ton of great little Photoshop tips along the way in it. So I hope you guys take advantage of this. As I said, this is a bundle I put together special for what we did here. I think it ties in very, very well, and it will keep you in consistent learning because I created all of these training courses and all of these systems to be aware of each other so that I have a very consistent approach to teaching you. Okay? All right. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about that. Let's dive into some of the questions now. Let's see here. So the first question is, what do you do if there's a reflection and you try to do a sky replacement? As we know, Photoshop only worked at the top here. So I'm going to point you to a tutorial I did on the website, mattk.com/blog, B-L-O-G. Okay. If you scroll back to the November timeframe, you will find a tutorial on how to hack the Photoshop sky replacement feature for a reflection. But I'll give you a quick glimpse here. It's a longer tutorial, so I'm not going to do the whole thing. And no need to follow along because you just probably want to go watch the tutorial. But what you would do is press Command or Control J to duplicate the layer. And then you go to Edit, go down to Transform, and you go to Flip Vertical. Okay? So that's going to flip the photo upside down. And then you go do your sky replacement. So Edit, Sky Replacement. And now Photoshop is going to fix. There's got to be something happening in there that's forcing it to work on the top of the photo, but it'll go in there and it'll add the sky to the reflection. Now, the tutorial shows you the rest of it because you got to flip it back and of course do the sky and all that stuff. Again, it's mattk.com/blog. And then you can just scroll down toward the November 2020 timeframe and you'll find a full tutorial on how to do that. Okay, but that's a quick little secret about the hack to get the sky replacement to work. Another one that I get pretty often is, so why didn't I do any noise reduction or sharpening? First off, I believe in most of your photos, noise reduction and sharpening is not what's missing. I consider them a technical adjustment. There is no magical way to do it. All right, there's nothing that's going to magically change your photo. So I just do it. You go to your detail panel inside a Lightroom or Camera Raw, wherever you do it, and you add sharpening or noise reduction until you feel your photo looks good. In most cases, sharpening and noise reduction only need to be done for a printed photo. You don't need to do it for your screen-sized photos. It's a little bit worse than this. This is a very high ISO wildlife photo, so I might go over to my noise reduction and do a little bit of luminance, a little bit of color noise reduction right there. Okay, keep that detail slider up a bit, but you can see before, after. So it does do a good job here. This is an exception, I think, to most photos. If you don't see the noise on the photo as you're looking at it on screen, and you're going to be sharing this photo to the screen, there's no need to be doing noise or even sharpening to it for that matter. You can add a little bit of sharpening, but it's not going to dramatically change your photo. I like to do wow. I like to be the person that teaches you wow. Sharpening and noise reduction is not wow. It's never going to have that impact on your photo. And I will say this, for certain wildlife photos, and I would probably even do it on this one, I go up here to Photo Edit In, and I go down. I have a program called Topaz Denoise AI. This is a third-party plugin from Topaz. I think it's topazlabs.com. If you just do a Google search on Topaz Denoise or Topaz Noise, you will get to the website. There's only one plugin that does it. But they do a really good job at removing the noise and keeping fur and feathers sharp. So if it's a wildlife photo and it's got really bad noise, which I think this one was pretty bad, I'd probably use a third-party plugin for that. But that is about the only thing that I use third-party plugins for. I don't use third-party plugins for. I try to avoid leaving Lightroom and Photoshop because it just confuses things and it takes a whole lot longer in your workflow and you get so much less done. So I try to keep it in Lightroom and Photoshop as much as possible. And for most things, Adobe is superior to just about anything else that's out there. All right, so that's one there. Let's take a look here. So we got how to do the reflections. We got no sharpening, no noise reduction. Oh, what about other versions of Lightroom? So Adobe has a program called Lightroom. What we've been doing is Lightroom Classic, which is what most people use. The cloud version of Lightroom is really all cloud-based. I personally don't think we're there yet. If you're a big DSLR, big megapixel camera shooter, I personally don't think we're there yet for this one because it is all cloud-based. But if you don't have a lot of photos, it could be useful. And anyway, here's the thing. Everything in the edit mode here is essentially the same as Lightroom Classic. So as you go through here, it might be renamed a little bit different, but they're all essentially the same exact adjustments. So you could follow along. It's got the brush, it's got the gradient, it's got the radio filter. And if you want to jump to Photoshop, you come under here to the file menu and then you go down here to edit in Photoshop and that will let you go to Photoshop just like we did from Lightroom Classic. All right, another question, we'll finish up on this one, would be, so we're in Photoshop or the question is, so what do I do if I'm not using Lightroom? And you don't have to use Lightroom from start to finish for every photo. If somebody sends me a photo and says, hey Matt, can you edit this? I'm probably not going to import it into my Lightroom library, open it up and edit it. I'm probably just going to open it up inside of Adobe Camera Raw. So when you open up a raw photo in Photoshop, when you go to File, Open, or you double click a raw file, when you open up any raw file or DNG file and you click Open, it will open you up into Adobe Camera Raw, which is this interface. These panels over here are essentially the same thing as what we had in Lightroom. Again, they might be named a little bit different. For example, I think optics is lens correction, but these panels are the same thing. So you can do all of your edits. They work exactly the same. The adjustments are exactly the same as what we had in Lightroom. They don't act or work any different than what we saw inside of Lightroom Classic. Okay, so if you want to use this workflow, and I do use it sometimes, Camera Raw is a good place to get to know. Again, it's got your brush, it's got your gradient and your radio filters, everything's right inside of here. And then when you're done editing your photo, so you've gone in here and you've done all these, you've gone in and done all of your edits to the photo. When you're done with that, you just click Open, and that brings you into Photoshop, where you can then do the sky replacement and all the stuff that we did there. So you still have a really nice workflow if you want to work back and forth between those two. Another thing is if you're already in Photoshop and you want to edit this photo in the Camera Raw dialog box, because it's got a lot of adjustments in there, you can just go to Filter, come down here to Camera Raw Filter, and that will open up that same window that we were just in, and you can still go back and do all of those edits. So you've got a nice workflow there. I know I said that was the last question. I'll finish up with a couple more. So what happens, Matt, I lost my layers palette. I can't find such and such panel, whatever it is. You know what to do, guys? Come up here to the window menu in Photoshop, go down here to Workspace, and I just go down to Reset Essentials, and that will reset your workspace to the basic default Adobe workspace. So if you've lost something, if you're not sure where it is, that's a good place to go. You can of course move these panels around, and you can create your own workspaces if you want to. I won't go into that here, but if you want to customize Photoshop. And then sometimes if you've lost a tool, what you can do is go over to the edit menu and go all the way down to menus and toolbar. All right, especially toolbar. You can show and hide tools. So you don't need to have the toolbar contain everything. You can show and hide these things, and that might have been the case. You might have hidden a tool at some point, or if this is something you want to do, if there's too many tools there, you can always go jump in there and show and hide those tools. All right, so this really is the last one. So what do? So you saw my photo go from Lightroom over to Photoshop as a TIFF file, and so how do you get it to be a TIFF? I often get, well, somebody will say mine's a PSD. This is in Lightroom Classic. If you go under the Lightroom Classic menu on a Mac, it would be under the Edit menu on a PC. If you go down to Preferences, inside of there, it's going to open up the Preferences, the whole Preferences dialog box. And inside of there, you go to External Editing, and it's there where you control how your photo is going to go from Lightroom to Photoshop. What you see on screen here is the defaults that come from Adobe. I don't change them. If you've got a reason to change them, by all means, feel free to research whether you'd want to do that or not. But for me, I just leave the defaults. So if yours is changed, at some point you changed it. But these are the defaults. So this is the file format that your photo, when you go from Lightroom and you say edit in Photoshop, if it's a RAW or a DNG photo, these are the settings that are going to get used as that photo hops over into Photoshop. Well, that officially brings us in for a landing for our webinar today. Thank you so much for joining me here. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I believe very strongly in this hands-on concept. It's different. It's a very different format, but in this day of online virtual learning, I think it's important to mix it up a little bit. And so while you were here for that 40-ish minute tutorial, if you follow it along, whether you failed or whether you succeeded, you were actively learning something, okay? I guarantee you, if you were practicing along with this, you learned something today and you were doing something with that time. And I think that's super important. I think it's a great way to round out our learning experience. And at the end of it, you figured out probably some areas where you need a little bit more help with when it comes to Lightroom or Photoshop or both. And I do hope that you will consider my bundle in that training experience as you decide to embark on that journey to learn more about these programs. I'd like to be the one that helps you out with it. All right. So thanks again, guys. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon.